The wind tore across the plain like something alive, dragging hot dust and a smell of scorched earth. Eli Ward leaned on his Winchester, watching the horizon from the shade of his porch, the boards beneath him groaning like old bones. The sun was low blood orange, casting long broken shadows across the dry grass. He should have been inside boiling beans, counting how much coffee he had left for the month. But something made him stay, some itch, some silence that didn't sit right. That's when he saw her. At first just a flicker in the wavering heat, then clearer, a girl, maybe 13, Apache. She was crawling, dragging herself over the dirt like a wounded animal, blood darkening her torn dress. Her hair stuck to her face, one hand clutched at her side. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her crawl. The wind caught her faint whimper. She collapsed face first, only 20 yards from his water trough. Still Eli didn't move. He scanned the horizon again. Nothing behind her. No riders. No dust trails. Just her and the wind and the dying light. Slowly he lowered the rifle, still unsure if what he saw was real. Ghosts had a way of walking in the desert out here, and Eli Ward had seen more ghosts than most. The girl didn't stir again. Dust curled around her like a shroud. He stepped off the porch and started walking slow, like toward a snake that might strike or vanish. His boots crunched on dry gravel. One more step and he'd be too close to turn back. He looked up once more. The horizon remained empty. But in his gut, something old twisted something, warning him this was no rescue. This was the start of something. Eli Ward hadn't spoken to another soul in 87 days. Not since the store clerk in Mesilla who'd eyed his weathered coat and sun-scarred face like he was something just stepped out of a grave. He lived alone west of the Jornada del Muerto, where the ground cracked from thirst and the sky never offered apology. The house he'd built with his wife sat hunched against the desert wind. 3 rooms, 1 stove, a cot he never slept right in. Most nights he sat out front, sipping coffee gone cold, waiting for nothing. He wasn't a young man anymore. His beard had grown white around the chin hands, marked with old scars and burns. The rifle never left his reach, and neither did the memory of flame. 8 years ago, Eli had worn blue, a U.S. Army scout with a knack for Apache dialects and desert tracking. Back then they called him Whisper Dog, for how he crept through mescalero camps and listened before striking. But that was before Isabel, before the raid, before the necklace. He kept that necklace in a drawer wrapped in a cloth that had once been her apron. It was Apache beaded, threaded with bone and dyed cord. He'd taken it after the fires went down and the screams stopped. He'd told himself it was proof. That's what he said during the tribunal. But it wasn't. It was penance. Isabel had worn it once briefly after he brought it home. Said it smelled like smoke and grief. She died 3 months later in a botched trade, gone violent, slit throat, no witnesses. No body either, just her blood on the porch and the horses gone. After that, Eli rode out of the army and into the desert, settling where the land was hardest and company scarce. The locals left him be. Even the rough men at watering holes knew not to test the quiet ones with fire behind their eyes. He never raised his voice, never smiled. Once when a neighbor's dog got bit by a rattler, Eli stitched it up without charge, then walked away before the man could thank him. He wasn't cruel, just empty. And inside that emptiness something festered. When the girl collapsed near his fence, part of him knew she wasn't just another lost soul. The desert didn't spit out survivors for free. He knelt beside her that evening, checked her pulse, found it thready, but there. Her skin burned with fever, her arm gashed to the bone, lips cracked and bleeding. He glanced again at the horizon, still nothing. He hoisted her gently, mindful of the wound, and carried her inside. She weighed almost nothing, bones like sticks. Her face, even in pain, held the echo of someone he'd seen once in a village burning under moonlight when screams climbed into the night and men cheered. He laid her on the cot, soaked a rag in water, and began cleaning the wound. She stirred, moaned something in Apache. Eli closed his eyes, letting the words settle into memory. A prayer. Or a name. Hard to tell. He bound the arm, fetched a blanket, left water nearby. She was burning up. Might not survive the night. Still, he stayed by the door with the rifle on his lap. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. All night he listened to her breathing. Shallow, labored. Every time it hitched, his gut twisted. Because deep down, Eli Ward knew, when the desert gives you something, it always takes double in return. Morning rose like a furnace. Eli stepped outside and watched the sky go from pewter to blistering gold. The girl was still alive. He'd checked 3 times before sunrise, each time expecting to find her cold. But she held on. Now in the harsh light of day, her features became clearer, high cheekbones, narrow nose, soft lips cracked from dehydration. Apache, no doubt. Maybe mescalero. Maybe something older. Her dress was torn, stitched from coarse fabric, not tribal weave, likely stolen. The wound on her arm was angry red, but no sign of rot yet. He'd done what he could. He poured water into a tin cup and sat beside her. Her eyes opened a crack, pale brown rimmed with red. She blinked at him without fear, without anything really. Just raw animal need. He raised the cup and she drank in small sips, trembling. "Name," he said quietly in broken Apache. She stared. "You got a name?" he asked again, this time in English. A pause. Then a whisper so faint he barely heard it. "Chuli." He nodded. Eli." She coughed, then fell back asleep. Eli sat beside her for hours, feeling her fever pulse through the small space like heat from a stove. Outside, the wind picked up again, whispering through the cracks in the wood. Chuli stirred and began to speak in broken Apache like dream talking. Words came fast, jumbled. Names, places. Eli caught only fragments: Stone Canyon, Mother, White Men Chains. Then finally Nal Yehe. His breath caught. That name he knew, Chief Nal Yehe. Desert Ghost. A war leader who disappeared years ago after a massacre. His brother had been burned alive in an army raid. Eli stood and stepped back. The room felt colder now. He looked at her differently. Not just a girl, not just wounded. A message. Or a matchstick. He turned toward the drawer and opened it. The necklace lay there wrapped tight. He didn't touch it. Couldn't. He closed the drawer and went outside. His boots sank into the dust. He squinted at the far hills, felt the air in his lungs. Something had shifted. He sensed it the way a horse senses a snake underfoot. He checked his rifle, loaded fresh shells, then circled the house, counting his stock of ammunition. By mid-afternoon, Chuli woke again. She tried to sit up. He helped her, handed her a slice of jerky. She chewed slowly, eyes fixed on him. "You soldier?" she asked, voice hoarse. Eli hesitated. "Was you kill Apache?" Another pause. "Yes." Her eyes didn't change. She only looked down, then touched the bandage on her arm. "You fix," she said softly. "That don't change the rest," he replied. She nodded once, like she already knew. They sat in silence until dusk. Then Eli noticed the quiet. No birds, no wind, no sound at all. He stepped out, rifle ready. On the horizon, where the land dipped into the arroyos, something moved. A shimmer, a line. His heart stopped. Riders, dozens, no more. He blinked. The line kept going, hundreds, all silent, all still, not charging, not shouting, just watching. They had surrounded him. He turned slowly, saw more shapes to the west, the south, even behind the low ridge to the north. Encircled, like a noose drawn slow. And at their center, unmoving, was a single rider atop a white horse wrapped in furs and beads, his face unreadable from the distance. But Eli didn't need to see his face, he already knew. Nal Yehe had come, and the girl inside was no longer just a guest. She was the reason they hadn't yet burned the place to the ground. Eli Ward stood in the yard, the dust whispering at his boots. The line of Apache riders didn't move, not a cough, not a twitch. Horses breathed clouds into the fading heat, eyes gleaming like river stones. There were too many to count, but Eli guessed near 300. An entire war party, mounted and armed, closing the distance without ever lifting a weapon. No banners, no drums, just presence, like judgment made flesh. And at their center, on the white horse that didn't fidget or sway, sat Nal Yehe. The last time Eli had seen him, the chief's face was painted in ash and blood, kneeling beside the charred corpse of his brother, shouting curses to the night sky. That had been years ago. A raid that was supposed to end in fire. But orders had come from higher up and Eli had followed them like a good soldier. He'd spoken their language. He'd earned their trust. Then watched it all burn. The necklace still wrapped in Isabel's apron was from that night. And now the past had arrived horseback and breathing. Chuli was awake. She'd crawled to the window, peeking through the faded curtain, her breath shallow. Nalyehe, she whispered, as if naming him summoned something older than man. Father. Eli looked at her, the fever gone now, clarity in her gaze. You're his daughter. She nodded. Traders took me. 5 winters passed. Sold me north. Her voice cracked. I ran 3 days. Her hand pressed the bandage. No more running. Eli turned back toward the riders. One was approaching now. A younger man, face painted blue with white slash marks. He rode slowly, no weapon drawn. When he reached the edge of the yard, he stopped and dismounted. Left his horse and walked the last few paces alone, hands open. Brave move, Eli thought, or suicidal. The rider stopped 10 feet from the porch. Then he spoke clear in English, shaped by effort. You have Chuli. Eli said nothing. The man continued. She was taken from her people. She returned. You kept her alive. Another pause. But you are Eli Ward. Eli stiffened. The rider nodded like he understood the weight of the name. Nalyehe does not forget. He reached into a leather pouch and drew out something wrapped in cloth. He tossed it gently onto the porch. Eli didn't flinch. The man stepped back. By sundown tomorrow she walks out to us or we come in. He turned, mounted, and rode back to the line. Eli picked up the cloth. Inside was a small bone whistle. APACHE made. A death marker. A reminder. A promise. He took it inside and sat down. Chuli stared at him, reading more from his silence than his words. You knew him, she said. Before. Eli nodded. Before all this. That night he didn't sleep. He boiled more water, fed Chuli strips of jerky and soft corn mash. She ate in silence, always watching him. When the moon rose, he stepped outside. The riders were still there. Campfires dotted the horizon like distant stars. No singing, no shouting, just watching. He spent the dark hours moving ammunition. 2 boxes of 44s, a half-dozen shells for the scattergun, and a rusted revolver with a loose cylinder. Not much. He counted every shot, measured every window. He'd fortified the house years ago, expecting trouble. Bandits, maybe. Coyotes. Not this. By dawn, he'd decided Chuli would stay in the root cellar, wrapped in blankets with food and water. If they attacked, she'd be safe for at least a little while. Maybe long enough for someone to find her. But deep down, he knew no one was coming. No one but them. As the sun cracked the sky again, Eli opened the drawer. The necklace lay inside. He unwrapped it slowly. Beads the color of blood and earth. Bone threaded like teeth. He'd never dared throw it out. Now he knew why. He stepped outside with it, letting the morning light catch on the beads. He held it in his hand a long time, staring toward the ridge where Nalyehe sat unmoving. The chief's gaze met his even from that distance. Then for the first time, Eli saw it pain. Not rage, not vengeance. Something colder. Deeper. A wound that never closed. Inside, Chuli whispered something again in APACHE. Eli returned, handed her the necklace. She looked at it, then at him. Yours, she asked. No, he said. It never was. He knelt beside her, looked her in the eyes. You want to go? She didn't answer right away. Then they'll kill you. He nodded. Maybe. Why, she asked. Because I did worse once, he said. And the land, don't forget. She reached out, touched his arm. I don't want to go alone. Eli stood, holstered his revolver. Then you won't. He looked outside again. The circle was smaller now. Closer. Tighter. No words left. No plans. Only dust and fire and one last walk through the past. Eli Ward knew how to prepare a house for dying. He'd done it once before, 8 years ago, when Isabel's killers rode off into the night and left the porch slick with her blood. Back then, he'd boarded the windows, loaded his guns, and waited for justice that never came. Now, as the morning burned into afternoon, he did it again. He moved with quiet hands, stuffing lamp oil into bottles, wedging nails beneath windows, setting bear traps beneath loose boards. He didn't pray, just worked. Julie watched from the cot, the necklace now around her throat. She hadn't spoken in hours. Her eyes were hollow, but her hands trembled. She knew what came next. When the sun dropped past the midpoint, Eli heard it, hoofbeats. Not a charge, just one rider again. This time it was an old man, leathered face, hair braided with eagle feathers, bare chest painted with ochre symbols. He rode close, slow, no weapons visible. Eli stepped out, shotgun resting on his shoulder. They stared at one another across 20 feet of heat-warped air. "I am Tia," the man said, voice deep and calm, keeper of Nalyeha's word. He looked to the porch. "The girl wears her name now. She belongs to the circle. Give her back and your blood will not be called." Eli didn't answer. Tia's eyes narrowed. "You think honor buys you time or penance?" He reached into a satchel, withdrew a small cloth and dropped it on the ground. Inside, a strand of long black hair tied with red sinew. "This is what the traitors left in her mother's hands." He pointed at the house. "Your hands hold what they took." Eli said, voice steady, "I never touched her." "No," Chia said, "but your fire did. Your voice led the soldiers in. Your words marked the tents. The fire knew your breath." Silence fell. The wind had stopped. Even the horses out beyond the ridge stood still. Eli finally said, "She walks out at dusk." "With me." Tia frowned. "The chief comes himself then. You will answer him." He mounted and rode away. Eli watched the dust settle, then turned and went inside. Julie was sitting up now, fully awake. "What did he say?" she asked. "That we're out of time," Eli said. He opened the cabinet beneath the sink and pulled out a bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. He had buried it once, dug it back up during a flood. Now it was stiff with oil, an old army uniform, blue faded to gray, the insignia ripped off. He put it on without a word. Julie watched him, eyes unreadable. "You going to die?" she asked. "We both might," he said, but not without being seen. By late afternoon, Eli led her out into the yard. The circle had tightened. Apache warriors now stood at bowshot, forming a ring of silence. In the center of it, Nalyeha sat atop his white horse, wrapped in black bear furs. His face was painted bone white, a single red line drawn from his forehead to his chin. His eyes locked onto Julie, then onto Eli. Together they walked to the center of the yard. Eli raised his hand. "She's here. She's alive." No reply. Nalyeha dismounted. The crowd parted for him. He walked alone, bare feet, kicking up dust. He stood before his daughter, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he reached out and touched the necklace. His fingers trembled. "My wife made this," he said, voice thick. "For her firstborn." He looked at Julie. "We thought you were fire-eaten. We buried a stone in your place." Julie stepped forward, one hand touching his. "I remember your voice," she whispered. "You sang to the fire." Nalyeha's breath caught. His hand dropped to her shoulder. He didn't cry. Apache men didn't. But something in him broke. Then his gaze shifted to Eli. The stillness changed. Every warrior around them tensed. "You," Nalyeha said, "were the mouth of the soldiers." Eli nodded. "I was. You led them to my brother. You burned his children. You gave the order." Eli didn't flinch. "I did. And now you bring my daughter to my hands." Nalyeha stepped closer. "What do you ask for, Mercy?" "No," Eli said. "Only that you let her decide." The circle stirred. Warriors murmured. Nalyeha's jaw flexed. "You speak of choice after stealing breath from our kin. I can't undo it," Eli said. "But I didn't know she was yours. I didn't know she was still alive. You kept her. I saved her." For a long time, no one spoke. Then Julie stepped between them. She turned to her father. "He could have left me, but he didn't." She looked back at Eli. "He killed your brother," she said to her father, "but he also gave me water. And a name." She pulled the necklace from her neck and held it out. "I give this back to you, but I decide who walks beside me." Nalyeha took the necklace, looked at it for a long time. Then without a word he turned and walked back to his horse. As he mounted, he raised the necklace to the sky and cried out, not a scream of victory, but a wail of return. The circle opened, the warriors parted, and one by one, without looking back, they began to ride. Eli stood there, the sweat on his neck cold now. He turned to Chuli. "You're free." She looked up at him. "So are you." But freedom, Eli knew, didn't come without fire. He looked back at the house. Smoke was rising from the roof. One of the riders had lit it as they passed. A message. A ritual. Not vengeance, but memory. The house burned slow. Eli didn't stop it. Didn't move. He watched it burn as night came, arms hanging at his sides. Chuli sat beside him on the dirt. Neither spoke. When the last beam cracked and fell, Eli whispered, "There goes the last piece of her." Chuli asked, "Is that why you stayed so long?" He nodded. "I was waiting for something to take it from me." She leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in years, Eli Ward didn't flinch from touch. They watched the ashes fall like gray snow, quiet as the breath between sins. The next morning, Eli stood where his porch used to be. The land was quiet but not peaceful. Smoke coiled from blackened boards, the air thick with the scent of memory and old sins. He hadn't slept. Chuli had curled in a bedroll beneath the sky, her face softened in rest. She looked younger now, almost small again. But Eli knew that what she carried inside would never be small again. He walked to the ash pile and knelt. There, barely touched by flame, was Isabel's apron. He lifted it, shook the cinders loose. The necklace was gone, returned to where it belonged. A strange emptiness filled him, not pain, not relief. Just the echo of something final. Chuli stirred awake eyes, adjusting to the light. She looked at the burned remains, then at Eli. "You don't have to stay here," she said. Eli nodded. "No, I don't." He helped her stand, and together they walked to the old stable. The horses were gone, taken by the Apaches as quiet payment. All except one, a pale Mustang with a crooked ear, stood tethered in the corner. A gift, perhaps, or a sentence. He saddled it. As they prepared to leave, a sound came from the ridge hooves. A single rider. Chuli tensed, but Eli raised a hand. The rider approached without haste, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a gray coat that fluttered like wings. As he drew near, Eli recognized him. Sheriff Thomas Hale from Mesilla. The man reined in his horse and nodded. "Heard the smoke," he said. "Thought maybe coyotes got bold." Eli didn't reply. Hale's eyes flicked to Chuli. "You all right, miss?" She gave a cautious nod. The sheriff dismounted. "That's your house?" he asked Eli. "Was. You burn it?" "Not exactly." Hale squinted at the ruins, then glanced at the horizon. "I count maybe 300 Apache riders moving east. Passed them on my way. Didn't even look at me." His tone carried something between awe and suspicion. "They ride like ghosts." "They were ghosts," Eli said quietly. Hale studied him. "You planning on telling me what happened? Wouldn't change much if I did." "No," Hale agreed. "But I might sleep easier." He kicked at the dust. "You going somewhere?" Eli looked to Chuli, then back. "Taking her home." "Where's home?" Hale asked. Eli looked to the hills. "Where she's remembered." The sheriff nodded once slow. "You gonna be all right?" "I wasn't for a long time," Eli said. "But maybe I will be." Hale took a slow breath. "Well, if anyone asks, I saw nothing. Fire started in the night. No tracks. No names." He paused. "And if anyone asks about you," Eli mounted the Mustang, "tell him the house is gone. And the man with it." Chuli climbed up behind him. Together they rode east into the morning. For miles they said nothing. The silence was not awkward. It was space, breath. When they reached a narrow canyon cut through the red rock, she finally spoke. "Why did you keep the necklace?" He didn't answer at first. The trail narrowed and the horse stepped carefully. When they reached a clearing, Eli halted and looked back at her. "Because I thought if I kept it, I could carry the blame instead of her father. That maybe it would change something." "Did it?" she asked. "No," he said. "But it changed me." They made camp that night beside a dry riverbed. Stars bled across the sky like tears on ink. Chuli took out a small piece of cloth from her satchel, something stitched by hand. She handed it to Eli. "For the fire," she said. He opened it. Inside was a circle of beadwork, red, white, black, and yellow. The 4 directions. The 4 lives. He swallowed hard. "You made this?" She nodded. "In the place they kept me." He held it carefully as if it might crumble. "Why give it to me?" She looked into the fire. "Because I want to remember you for what you did, not what you were." The fire cracked. He looked into the flames, saw the shape of a house long gone, a woman he'd loved, and a village he'd betrayed. He saw the weight of everything, and for once it didn't crush him. It just sat beside him. A companion. He stayed up after she slept, holding the beadwork, watching the flames. The desert was quiet again, but not empty. The past was here, yes, but it no longer hunted him. It just waited, and he would meet it each day with the girl who chose to walk beside him. The morning came pale and gold soft over the mesas, and Eli woke to silence. Not the fearful kind, the kind that feels like a held breath finally exhaled. Chuli slept curled under the wool blanket, arms tucked tight, the faintest smile at her mouth. She'd stopped murmuring in her sleep. The nightmares had for now retreated. Eli packed the camp slow, letting her rest. He didn't think about where the trail would end. He just knew it wasn't here. They rode again east by southeast toward the sacred lands where the Rio Bonito touched the foot of the hills. The old ones lived out that way, those too ancient to take part in raids, too wise to bother with revenge. He hoped they'd remember her, that they'd see her face and whisper the names of those she came from. At noon they reached a rise overlooking the valley. Chuli gasped. Below them on the river bend, a dozen lodges stood in tight formation, weathered but upright. Smoke curled from 3 of them. Chickens pecked in the dirt. A woman stirred a pot outside. 2 children ran laughing in the dust. Chuli didn't speak. She slid off the horse and walked to the edge, staring down like she couldn't believe it was real. Eli watched her a moment longer, then reached into his coat. He withdrew the circle of beadwork she had given him, the 4 colors of life sewn in a tight ring. He tied it to the saddle horn, then dismounted. They walked the rest of the way. No one stopped them, no one spoke, but heads turned, eyes tracked them. And then an old man stepped from a lodge, face weathered like stone left too long in wind. His eyes locked onto Chuli. Her steps faltered, her voice caught. "Grandfather." The man said nothing, just held out his arms. Eli stood back and watched as she ran, folding into him, sobbing against his chest. Around them murmurs rose, names were whispered. Hands reached out to touch her shoulders. She was home. Not all the way, but far enough to begin again. When she turned back to Eli, her eyes shone. She ran to him and pressed something into his hand. A flint arrowhead worn smooth with time. "This is for your fire," she said, "so it won't burn alone." He looked at her, the valley, the circle of watching elders. Then he nodded once slow. He left before sundown without a word. Just climbed onto the Mustang and turned west. The next night, a traveler passed through the same valley and asked who the man was, the one who came with the girl. They answered he had no name anymore, just ashes where a house used to be and a fire that did not consume. Far out beyond the reach of the hills, in a stretch of land where the wind writes names into the dust, a figure rides alone. Behind him, the smoke has faded. But something else lingers, a trail of footprints made not in fear but in forgiveness. And on the saddle horn, a single ring of beadwork turns slow in the breezered white, black, and yellow, turning like time, like truth, like the kind of redemption that does not ask for return, only for memory. Watch the next story of sacrifice and legend in the West. Subscribe for more tales that burn like the land they're born from.